This evening, we would like to take a look at the book of Peter. That's Peter Bet. That's Second Peter chapter 3. And the intent is to use the book of Peter, his epistle, to analyze the events that are taking place in our world. Events that most people don't seem to have an answer to. Many are assailed by the events, emotionally and otherwise. Their mental, psychological acuity is being assailed from every conceivable direction. They are continually beset by the circumstances, particularly in light of what transpired over the weekend when we read and we watched and we learned that bombs were being rained down in the sovereign state of Iran and in the surrounding areas. And as we know, Israel has been fighting over the last year or so. And as we watch the increasing tension in the world, it behooves us to make some rational, reasonable sense of what is going on and to use the word of Yah to frame those events and to be able to share them with each other. So that's the intent in our prayer meeting this evening. And so I would like to call your attention to the book of Kephabet and the third portion of that. And the word reads, "This is now, beloved ones, the second letter I write to you, in which I stir up your sincere mind to remember the words previously spoken by the Kodash Nebim and of the command of the Adon and Savior by our emissaries. Knowing this first, that mockers shall come in the last days with mocking, walking according to their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all continues as from the beginning of creation." We've heard them. Others have heard them. The mockers, they come and they say, what's new? Ever since time, there has been war and rumors of the same. And when you go back to the history of time, you see that. And you yourself are tempted to agree with them, except you see the rapidity of things to such an extent in that the movements are now far more rapid than they were. And the word of Yah tells us that there is a time, this time, the now generation, that will see things that no other generation has seen. And we're seeing them with our own eyes. It's just that many are not able to make sense of them. And so Kepha here, the apostle, is letting us know mockers will come. And it doesn't matter how much you try to explain that prophecy is here playing out in politics. And in the wars that they see on TV and they read off in the newspaper, it's just a fulfillment of prophecy, and they will just scoff at that. Peter says they will, and say these things have always been. They won't change. And so we are left to find answers. Verse 5 of the same chapter. For they choose to have this hidden from them, that the Shemahim were of old, and the herd standing out of the water and in the water by the word of Yahweh, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. Don't miss what Kiefer is here saying. And the present Shemaim and the earth are treasures up by the same word, being kept for fire to a day of judgment and destruction of the wicked men. Kiefer says the ancient world was destroyed by flood during Noah's time, and the wicked people died. The scoffers died. And the scoffers, the contemporary scoffers, they too will die, but by a different method, by fire. Kiefer wants us to know that Yah is watching and he's judging the world, and the men and women, wherever they be, they are fitting themselves into position, whether for good or for evil. They are playing their part in the end time scenarios that leads to the ultimate destruction of this world. And there are two groups of people during that period of time. There is the righteous and the unrighteous. No more must we see ourselves as Democrat and conservative, Labor and conservative or Tory, PNP and JLP. It is righteous and unrighteous. And in a religious sense, it is not a Baptist or a Pentecostal or a Seventh-day Adventist or Episcopal. It is not that. It is simply a righteous man and an unrighteous man. A distinction will be made by way of how they live their lives and how Yah records their deeds in his book. Because Daniel said, I saw the book, and the books were opened, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. So these are serious times, and we cannot dismiss them as casual events. We cannot do that. And so Kiefer wants us to know that, beloved, verse 8, let not this one thing be hidden from you. Let it not escape your attention, that with Yah, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. The apostle is urging us to understand that conception. 1,000 terrestrial years is equal to one celestial day. And what Kiefer is here doing, he is going back into Bereshit, the book of Genesis, to explain what here is found in chapter 6. And I would ask you to join me in chapter 6 of the book of Beginnings, and I will read verse 3. And Yah said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, For that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Kiefer picks up that theme. He plugs the verse and says to understand that, you must first acknowledge the fact that 1,000 years is one day in the celestial realm. So when Yah says, my spirit, my ruach, will not always dwell with man because he's flesh. Now, some have walked away with this, and they have taught others that this means that man's lifespan at that particular time would be 120 years. This 120 was said to have been spoken 120 years before the flood. But we know that even after the flood, people lived much more than 120 years. Shem lived after the flood. Abraham lived after the flood. And they lived far beyond 120 years. So we know that's not what he's talking about. But the word here in the French is what you would call a double entendre. It has double meaning. Peter is letting you know that yes, it refers to the flood, but it refers also beyond. So what was Yah saying? Because he's here wanting to address the scoffers in the last days, who will tell you, what is the point of doing what you're doing? There is no logical outcome. Because these things have always happened, and they will continue to happen infinitively. Peter says no. And he goes back to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 3. And he wants you to know that when Yah spoke this, it was intended to be a double entendre. Meaning, in a legal term, that it was a latent ambiguity. That means that on the surface, the document that you're reading doesn't reveal the fact that it can be interpreted another way. There is an alternative view to it. But there is, when examined closely, you will see that when you employ external factors, there is another meaning. A kind of a prima facie view we have of this. Meaning, at first value, we look at it and we say, oh, this is man's probation for 120 years. That's how we would live. But that's not what the word is saying. When Yah says, my ruach will not dwell with man, but there are 120 years given to them. He's saying there's 120 jubilees. That's what he's saying. So from the creation of Adam, the human father, to the end of time, there will be 120 times 50, because every 50 years, it's a jubilee. And it was quite interesting, only a week or so ago, America celebrated its fifth jubilee, 250 years. I'm not sure whether they understood, and perhaps they should have, that on a jubilee, debts are canceled and slaves are set free. People are liberated. We didn't see that happening in the streets of America. More than that, we saw people hounding each other because of immigration policy. No, that's not what a jubilee is. A jubilee is to set the captives free and liberate the people. Their houses are given back to them that they had leased out or rented out, and debts are canceled. It didn't happen. And you know, Yah is one who fixes things right when he is ready at the time of his choosing. So I would like for you to come with me at this particular point to the book of Jubilees or Yoberlin. And I'm going to ask you to look at the second portion of it. This book is called Little Genesis, in the sense that we're made to understand that Yah called Moses or Moshe on Mount Sinai and dictated the events from the beginning of creation to him, and he wrote it down. Somehow they has omitted this from certain of the Bibles, but thank Yah, we have it in ours. Shall we read? And the messenger of the presence spoke to Moshe according to the word of Yahweh, saying, write the complete history of creation. Write it. How 6 days Yahweh created all his works. He finished all his works and all that he created, and guarded the Sabbath on the seventh day, and kadosh it for all ages, and appointed it as a sign for all his works. Write this down, Moshe. Let the people know. Send it out to the people, the children of Israel, meaning that all who accept Yeshua and are walking in his light, the children of Israel, should note this, that after Yah completed his work, he had set the Sabbath in motion. It is a product of creation for all people, and it is a sign between me and them, says Yah. Let them know that. Because maybe time will come when people will choose a different day in violation of this. Write it down, Moshe. And Moshe did. For on the first day he created the Shemahim, which are above the earth, and the waters and all the spirits which serve before him, the messenger of the presence, and the messenger of the Kodoshah, and the messenger of the spirit of the wind, and the messengers of the spirit of a cloud, and of darkness, and of snow, and of hail, and of hoarfrost, and in the messengers of the voices of the thunder, and the lightning, and the messengers of the spirits of the cold, and of the heat, and of the winter, and of the spring, and of the autumn, and the summer, and all the spirits of his creatures, which are in the Shemahim and on the earth, the abysses and the darkness, evening and night, and the night dawn, and the day which he has prepared, and the knowledge of his heart. I want to go over this verse here. He says in verse 2, for on the first day he created the Shemahim, which are above, and the earth and the waters, and all the spirits which serve below him. Clearly stated here, the earth is below. the heliocentric model of our solar system given to us by the scientific community is one that places the sun at the center of the solar system, in which the planets, not precluding the Earth, orbit around the sun. That's what they tell us. From an early age, they deposit that view in school. And throughout our learning experience, they continue to tell us that. Therefore, in their contrivance, I say contrivance because it is counterfactual to the word of Yah. So in their contrivance, the Earth's gravitational position is described by its conceived orbit around the sun and not the scriptural descriptions of the Earth below the sun, as indicated here in the book of Jubilees. It says the Earth is below. And so the Earth is not considered in location to be above or below the sun in their conception, in the scientific community conception. The sun's gravity, they say, pulls the Earth towards it by the Earth's forward momentum, keeps it in roughly circular orbit around the sun rather than crashing into it. So they say this interplay of gravity and velocity creates a continuous orbit. And as I understand their conception, flawed though it is, I think, my mind races to Joshua chapter 10, when Joshua said, and he commanded the sun to stand still and the moon to stand still. And so I asked myself, even as I threw this out for your consideration, why did Joshua ask the sun to stand still rather than the earth that is said to be moving at speed of 1,000 miles an hour? Why? And so I'm throwing that out because as I read the Jubilees, Yahweh told Moses, write this down. Write it down. And so when the scoffers come and they try to explain to us, or to conjecture, not explain, to conjecture that what we're seeing in the world is not leading to an ultimate destruction, but it has always been as part of the process. It is customary for wars and rumors of the same to continue. I want to remind them and inform those that didn't know that when Yah made 7 days, he said, I give man 6, meaning from the time of Adam, man would have 6,000 years. And at the end of that 6,000 years, he would put in his appearance. And so the 7th day, which is 1,000 years, which we call the millennium, would be the 7th day Sabbath, in which he would give us rest. And so when we come on a Sabbath day to worship him, we are simply rehearsing, of which we are admonished to do, because it's a sign between him and his people. And we are called to meet with him every 7th day cycle. And he said, remember the 7th day. He codified it in his law. Remember the 7th day to keep it holy. Because in so doing, you are preparing yourself for the millennium period. Peter says, don't let this thing slip you. Don't be ignorant of this one fact. Don't let it happen. And so come with me to Genesis chapter 5. Just slip over to the page I just read from chapter 6 earlier. And the word says, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that Yah created man in the likeness of Yah, made he him male and female. Created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived, the word says, 130 years, and begat a son of his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. Now, I want you to understand this. Adam is a son of Yah. And in terms of the biblical record, he's the only human being who could really be called the son of Yah. What do I mean? Adam was created like the messengers, like the angel, like the seraph, like the cherubim. He was created, so he was a son of Yah. All others who were born of a woman, we become sons of Yah by way of adoption. Notice when he had Seth, the Bible says, in his likeness, not in Yah's likeness. Why? Because sinful man cannot produce the image of Yah. Cannot. Adam was told, the day you eat of that fruit, you will die. Not you may die, you will die. And I've heard it said, and I've heard preachers romanticize the word, saying, oh, he died spiritually. Not so. Now you understand why Kepha was urging you to understand the conception of time. Kepha, let me remind you, said 1,000 years. In the context of the spiritual realm, is one day. So Adam lived 930 years. So say the word. Which means that he was 70 years short of a day. Yes, he died in the day that he ate the fruit. Not the 24-hour day, but the celestial day, because that's what Yah is dealing with. And so often when I see people do their computation with prophecies and they're using the Gregorian calendar, of course it's going to be wrong. Because every new moon starts Yah's month, this new month. And as we read in Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 23, it says, even after he comes, from one new moon to the next, the Sabbath will be kept. But I hear the church is saying these things are done away with. They're done away with. And if we should read Tehillim, Psalm 19 verse 4, let's hear what it says. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. It's a watch in the night. So in Genesis 1, we read that Yahweh created a week of 7 days. each of which is 1,000 years. Thus he gives man 6 days, as I indicated before. That is 6,000 years, after which the seventh day of the week is the Sabbath, the millennium. So when the scoffers come and say, well, he hasn't come yet and things will continue, no, because we have not reached the 6,000 years yet. We are nearing or entering into the 120 jubilee, the last jubilee. So the earth doesn't have much time. In fact, the Apostle Paul says the earth is groaning for its own deliverance. Why? Because in Genesis, when Adam sinned in chapter 3, the earth was cursed. It did not yield fruits even as it should have in the early part of the creation. Thorns and thistles, we're told, started growing. These were not present in the creation before Adam sinned. Not at all. And so we must understand that the events that we see unfolding in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Europe, all over the world, they are moving slowly and rapidly, that's the irony, towards an ultimate fulfillment of the prophecy and the destruction of this age. So these mighty men we call leaders, sovereigns of nations, with their war machines, and are raiding each other and threatening each other, I wonder how much thought is given to their own souls. They're trying to liberate each other, so they say, when their own souls are in bondage. I wonder. And we must ask ourselves some very serious questions. And so I'm going to ask you to come with me to the book of Daniel. Daniel, as you know, was a young man taken from Judah during the siege of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian sovereign. He was a bright young man. He schooled well. And Nebuchadnezzar saw that and drafted him into his company of intelligent people, tested him, promoted him. And on one occasion, the monarch had a dream. And none of his people could interpret the dream. And they sought the service of Daniel. And Daniel came forth and explained to him what would happen gradually, progressively to the end of time. You, sir, he says, you may not have remembered what you dreamt, but there is one in the Shemaim who knows all things, and he has informed me, and I'm passing that on to you. You dreamt that you saw an image, and that image is a golden head. That's you. Breastplate, silver, lesser than you. Bronze thigh, feet of iron and clay, and so on and so forth. Toad. We're now living in the toe time of that image. But Daniel's application and implication did not rest there. Come with me to chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings, which king? The President of the United States, Prime Minister of England, Prime Ministers of the Caribbean, of Russia, of Ukraine, all over the world, in Africa. In the days of these kings, Daniel wants you to know what's going to happen. You're not going to be living at that time, Mr. Monarch, but I want you to know the progressive nature of prophecy is such that Yah has told me, and I want you to know so that the people who take heed can prepare themselves for it. So when the skeptics come and they say these things will continue forever, I say to them, stop being a dullard. Stop that. You speak unwisely. In the days of these kings shall the Yah of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall be not left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all the kingdom, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out of the mountain without hand. The stone was cut out of the mountain, the holy mountain, the Kodesh mountain, without hands, and it brake to pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great Yah hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof. This, Daniel says, is certain. It matters not what the skeptics down the ages said, or what the mockers said, or what the scientists conceived in their mind. He said it's certain. It's going to happen. So when you read the morning papers and you hear man shot dead and Rude is at war, gun fever, you hear that nation has just raided the other nation and they're on their way with their big bombs and their dirty bomb. Daniel said, I told you this would happen. Until the 6th millennium is complete. It will happen. And so we need not fret ourselves over evildoers, the word says. We need not do that because circumstances have, by way of duty, called us to search the scriptures to see if we can make sense of what is going on. We need to make sense of it because the word, Daniel says, is true. And these things are unfolding. And so we want to know something else. So I'm going to ask you to join me in the book of Tehillim so that you can understand why what is taking place is happening. Chapter 2. You get up in the morning and you watch the TV, you speak to your neighbor, and the thought is the same everywhere. Why do the nations rage? Chapter 2. Book of Psalms. Why do the heathens rage and the people imagine vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his anointed, saying, let me hold it there. The things that are happening in the Middle East and in all of the world, the psalmist here says, the people are raging against the Almighty Yah. And he asks the question, why? Then he tells you, he says, because they don't like what he is doing, they don't like his law, and they are rebelling against the Father and his Son, the Anointed One. Let me say it another way. You remember campaign season, wherever you are in the world. And people come to your door and they knock and they ask you to vote for a particular candidate. The psalmist says, the candidate you vote for is against the sovereign that you believe in. You have just voted for somebody who is against your Yah and against his anointed one. Who are they? The kings of the earth, the leaders of the earth. They're rebelling against Yah. They say, verse 3, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall what? Laugh. Yah shall have them in derision. And they will say, but we're not doing that. And the question is, do you keep his Sabbath? No. Where are you on Sabbath? In the marketplace. You're shopping. You're on the beach. Remember the seventh day to keep it all. Do you keep that? No. So you're rebelling. Do you keep his feast days? No. So you're rebelling. But, that's a conjunction. Yah says, you must fear him and keep his commandment. Then may you be able to demonstrate your love for him. Love doesn't come first. Love comes after you fear him and do his commandment. If you love me, keep my commandments. That's what he's saying. So, the kings of the earth, they are spending more in money to build weapons to destroy each other than they are contributing to the work of Yah. Think of it this way when he comes. Think of the servants that he had left to do his work, and he had given them talents each. And when he comes back and he says, so you, sir, you were a millionaire, and your neighbor a billionaire. How much money did you invest in the work of the gospel? And how much war machines did you build in comparison to what you should have done? I did not call you to fight. I call you to serve. Remember the poor among you. I imagine they will be speechless. Speechless. They have built their submarines, warplane that flies outside of radars, not knowing that Yah has a radar that you cannot escape from. And they boast. This is what I have done. And I'm going to do even more. And they speak in the language of expletives. In an age of enlightenment. And the people do not even bat an eyelid. Not even an eyelid. But according to Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 9, we're made to understand that there is really nothing new under the sun. So with that in mind, come with me to the book of Daniel chapter 4. The word says, Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all the people, nation and languages that dwell in the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the High hath wrought towards me. How great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders, his kingdom in an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. This is Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel spoke to Nebuchadnezzar. Come with me to verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, every time they capture you, whether it's through colonial raids or otherwise, they give you another name. And we walk around with names that don't belong to us. And we don't even know who we are. That's how they do it. And Daniel was no different from us. That's why we're Daniel people. By experience, that's how we are. And so then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him because he had a vision. The king spake and said, Belshazzar, let not the dream of the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belshazzar answered and said, my master, the dream to be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof of thine enemies. This is the dream of the tree that was to be cut down, referring to Nebuchadnezzar when he was made a vegetarian by force and put in the bushes to eat grass. This mighty king, this monarch of Babylon, was pompous, impudent, insolent. He had the audacity to speak and to do things that no other monarch had done. And we're seeing this emerging again. No wonder the word of Yah says, Babylon is fallen. Fallen is Babylon. A second time, Mr. Babylon. We're seeing it. So let's look at this king's prideful boast. Because the word tells us that before a man falls, pride comes. Pride comes before a fall. The very thing that creeps into Lucifer's heart. He wanted to be king. Not only a king, but a king above the Creator. I'm going to move my throne and bring it upstairs, says he. I'm going to be like the Most High. People talk like that. So let's look at it. Let's examine it. Verse 28. All this came unto the king Nebuchadnezzar, and at the end of 12 months, Daniel had spoken to him and told him, in essence, behave yourself. Humble yourself before Yah. But after a year, at the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon, the king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom of the mighty of my power and for the honor of my majesty? Where have you heard that before or since? I have made Babylon great. That's what he said. He had forgotten that it's Yah who builds kings up and brings them down. He had forgotten that. While the word, did you hear me? While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from the Shemaim, from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, and until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will, the same hour, the same what? The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagles. Did you hear that? Eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. I don't want you to miss that. Because as I study, I see here the double entendre. Did you see it? The word said, let's go slowly in it. It says, this Babylon that fell. Remember, it is the same pompous, impudent Nebuchadnezzar who raided Jerusalem, burned the temple, took the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, and took them to Babylon and ruled them with a mighty fist. In Revelation, we are told Babylon, the second angel in Revelation chapter 14, says that Babylon is fallen. Not the old Babylon, but the new Babylon is fallen. And it says, in the old Babylon, his hairs were grown like the eagles. Babylon's emblem was an eagle. Now you wonder whether the new Babylon is an emblem of eagle. And if so, what are we about to see Yah do with the eagle's feathers of the leaders of Babylon? Interesting. Was driven to eat grass because of his pomposity, his audacity, his impudence. That's what happened. Despite the fact he had good counsel from Daniel, he never listened because power was more to him than showing respect to Yah. And so I just want to remind people that whether you believe the truth or not, it's still the truth. And Yah says that the unfolding events that are taking place in whatever country throughout the world, they are leading to this end time. And there are many Nebuchadnezzar, contemporary Nebuchadnezzars. But it's the same, yeah. He's the same yesterday, and he's the same today, and he's the same forever. And he will always deal righteously. And so Amos cries out, let righteousness come down like a mighty stream. Let it come. And so we're trying to rationalize what will happen and what the events are going to lead to. It's clear in the word. Soon the leaders will run to the rock, and the rock will seek an hiding place for itself when, yeah, unmixed wrath is brought upon the world. Men with their wealth, men with their power, these self-acclaimed mighty men. The word says, every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess that Yeshua is Yah. May we understand that. May we live the truth that we know, and may we tell it to others. Even if they don't believe us, tell them. Such is the word we pray and thank him in Yeshua's name. Amen.